Good morning. Today we're going to speak about persuasive speaking. This is the big one. This is the one that has 300 points, so you probably want to listen. Chapters 19 and 20 are the chapters that talk about it. I'm going to kind of walk through those and hopefully give you some decent examples, okay? What we want to get from this is to understand that all of you, whether in public speaking or in life, you practice persuasion. Let's say you're asking for a raise, asking for a job, asking for the car, asking for someone's hand in marriage, whatever. You've got to persuade somebody. And in order to persuade, there are certain steps that you take to do that. One of them, of course, is the Monroe's motivated sequence, which we've talked about before. The other is really the oldest thing in the business. It's Aristotle's writing. And it's ethos, logos, and pathos, which I've mentioned. You can, as I say, only make 3 real points in a speech that are going to stick with an audience. But those points need to focus on those 3 areas. What are the ethics of the situation? What is the logic behind my particular argument? And what is the pathos? What is the empathy? What is the feeling that we will have for having properly dealt with this particular issue? So whatever issue you deal with is that. Now, one of the ways that you do that goes back to Socrates, who didn't write as much down at all, but he talked a lot. And what Socrates developed, which we cleverly call the Socratic Method, involves how to argue. Here's how to argue. First of all, when you talk about any subject, let's talk about a tough one, abortion, okay? Abortion, the idea that a woman has the right to choose whether or not to have a child. Nobody loves the idea of abortion, even those ladies who feel that they must have one because of their economic circumstances, educational, whatever. So the thing that we can all agree on, whether you're a, quote, right-to-lifer or a women's rights person, is that we don't want children to not have parents, to not have a family, to not have the biggest possible chance in life. We don't want a good mind to go to waste. So how do we deal with that? You find out first, what do you agree on before you find out what you disagree on. What we agree on is that we would all like children to be happy. We would all like children to have the best chance in life. Where we might disagree is how to solve this problem. Why would someone have an abortion? Because they have some reason, whether it's from a health standpoint or from an economic standpoint or from just where they are in life standpoint. But what if every woman that was even considering the idea of an abortion knew that that child that she was about to bear at some point would be adopted by a family that would love it and give it a chance to have a full life? That levels the argument a little bit, because nobody's dying to have an abortion. I can't speak from experience, obviously. And everybody would like anyone on earth to have a chance to live. At least, that's the basics. So consider how you argue. Always think about that. Let's take it down to something as simple as your girlfriend wants to go to an event that you don't want to go to. What you need to figure out is, what do you agree on about the event? Yeah, we both like her, but we both hate her husband. And every time I see him, he makes me feel terrible, blah, blah, blah. So eventually you can convince your mate to say, all right, maybe I'll go alone, or maybe we won't go, or maybe we'll just stop in for a few minutes, a quick visit. You can alter the argument. Now, one thing that we've talked about in a persuasive speech is that, in fact, you are trying to make a point. You are trying to bring about some action. How do you do that? I'm checking the chart once in a while, so you'll see me looking sideways. And what you're doing is, it's an attempt to change an attitude, to reinforce an attitude if they happen to agree with you, a belief, a value, or a behavior. Now, persuasion permeates society, but when we engage in it, we have to do so ethically. and successfully by avoiding coercion and manipulation. And as I've mentioned a few times in this course, do not take today's political speech making and positioning and stuff as part of effective public speaking. It is all wrong. And here's why. The idea of ethics, before you even get to the logic of a situation, ethics mean that you're using facts. Now, if I tell you a fact, you may trust me because I'm an adjunct lecturer in this particular course. But if I'm able to quote a reliable source, someone that you might think is valuable, for instance, General Powell today said, a Republican who served in I believe, the Bush administration, says that he's going to vote for Biden. That is a fact on his part, and it influences me, or would influence me, if I was a Republican, to at least go, now here's a man who was Republican who served in the government. Why would he vote for the other party? It's making me potentially consider the situation if I'm listening at all. Now, as I've mentioned to you before, all audiences in any speech, especially any persuasive speech, there are three parts of the audience. There's a number of people that agree with you, about a third of the audience. There's about a third of the audience that come at this thing very negatively and disagree with you, whatever the subject is. And then there's about a third of the audience that isn't going one way or the other, just he hasn't thought about it enough, doesn't have an opinion, really doesn't know what to do. That's where you target your speech. That's where you target your persuasive speech. So how do you do that? You build on beliefs. As I said, in the case of abortion, regardless of what side of that coin you come down on, nobody wants to see children born into poverty and hopelessness. And, that's a base. What do we do to make life better for everybody? Both the person who may feel they have to have an abortion and the people who would like to not see abortions. How do you balance that? Then you think about the values of people. What do we all believe? And then you integrate the attitudes and the beliefs and the values of those people. What's an attitude? Again, as I think I mentioned early in the class, some of you, most of you, probably still either live at home, and some of you are living on your own for the first time, maybe have roommates for the first time. And the fact is that you have what is called peer pressure from your family, whether they mean to or not. There are attitudes in the family. They've always said that racism is learned. It's not, you're not born with it, it's taught. And things like that, all of your attitudes come out of the surroundings, the environment of your life. So that if your environment has been negative in a certain way, you may enter the world with that opinion locked in. How do I change that opinion? And the way I change that opinion is to first talk about what is the situation. Find the baseline. Find the part that we can agree upon. What's the part we would like our government to work better? Let's start there. It's real big. Lots of things to argue about, but we would all like to know that everybody had a fair shot. Everybody could, afford to live their lives, not have to hold 4 jobs and not have a family life, to understand what it is that gives life value, that you can have a job and you can have a life and you can have a family. This is what we hope is the American dream, what we hope we can all deserve. Any of you that are from other countries, that's probably why your family chose to come here. So the more you know about that, you have to then take that, and the thing we can't do online, of course, is you have to look at your audience. And there's lots of ways. You can learn about who the audience is from the people organizing the event, so that before you speak, you have an idea of what the group is. You can listen. Introduce yourself to the audience. Mention the subject you're going to talk about. And as I said, in a persuasive speech, the first thing you do, regardless of what your argument is to simply define the issue. Not the who's for it and who's against it, just define the issue. As you define the issue, watch the audience. Watch them like they're making a speech to you. Because right then and there, you're going to see something. You're going to see some people who are going to go, And you're going to see some people who are going to go, and you're going to see some people who are simply not there or are looking at their phones, as you may be now. But the fact is, you're going to get a sense of who is in the audience, what the thinking of the audience is. Now, because it's a third and a third and a third in terms of their thinking, they're not all going to be in little lumps sitting in the right direction. So you've got to shoot the whole audience with your logic. And what you have to do is make your argument in a way that does not offend the people that clearly understand and agree with your argument and does not insult their intelligence. By the same token, you need to take the part of the audience that is more than likely negative or showing a negative reaction to you and give them reasons with facts behind them, facts that they can trust. Do you trust this publication? Do you trust this particular person in leadership? Do you believe in this person? Here's what this person said about that. Then what you do is you may not change the opinion of anyone in a persuasive speech that was absolutely against your subject, but if they go away simply saying, I still disagree, but those arguments were interesting. They're worth considering. If you can get someone who's against the idea you were going to talk about to consider or reconsider their opinion after, you've been successful. And if you haven't insulted the people that like what you're talking about and realize that what you're doing is building more of a base of support, you've done well there. And the people in the middle, they're the most vulnerable. That's the easy catch. Those are people that haven't really thought about it. And so if you present it logically, you have a chance to win some people over, to create some change. The other thing you want to do at the beginning of the speech, as I said, of course, define the subject. First, state your name, tell them who you are, define the subject, and then state what is the issue, what is your take on this issue. And then you're going to make 3 major points of what the take is on that issue. And as you do that, you're going to start, you can do them in any order. You don't have to have the ethics first and the logic second. You sort of want to end up with the pathos, the conclusion. The strength of a speech is to say, and if next year we are able to all go out and do everything we can, and our social distancing has been, we're still social distancing, but we're realizing we can get along. We can have a life. We just have to be a little more careful. As the world gets smaller, disease can spread faster, more internationally. So you think about it in that way. So in a persuasive speech, there are many subjects you can talk about. I'm going to be sending you on Monday morning a list of some potential subjects. You do not have to do any of them. But with those particular subjects, I have put in attachments of an article on each of those subjects so you get a concept of what it is to argue about. And some of which, frankly, it's some stuff I used from last semester, some of which don't matter in the face of an epidemic. I really don't care if prostitution is legal or not right now because ain't nobody going unless they're stupid. And stupid is an argument we can have all day. But there are several things you can argue about. You may choose whatever you want. The usual way we do this is we pick a legislative issue and one person argues for and one person argues against. No point in doing that, nobody to talk to. Simply find something that you feel you can persuade an audience about, that you want to convince us of, something that you believe is a core value. And whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. We're playing lawyers here. Think of a persuasive speech as if you were one of the attorneys in a trial, a murder trial, okay? A life depends on this. After all the witnesses have been questioned by the prosecution and then cross-examined by the defense, and then the defense brings up their people and they're cross-examined by the prosecuting attorney, at the end of all of that, when everybody rests their case, the next segment of the trial is, before instructions to the jury even, the next section of the trial is for the judge to say to both the defense and the prosecution, you may give your closing arguments. They may limit it to a period of time. Sometimes they can take hours and hours. In your case, you have 4 to 5 minutes, so get your act together. You are taking they've heard 30 or 40 witnesses in this trial. God knows what the hell they're thinking. Although if you've watched the faces of the jurors, and that's a real science now, if you've watched what their reactions are to it, you have some sense of who's on your side, who isn't, who's somewhere. There's just like anything else, a jury divides into thirds also. Third are guilty, a third are not guilty, a third saying, beats the hell out of me. So what you do is when you do your closing argument, that's your persuasive speech. You're taking all the facts that they heard in the trial, whether it's a week or 2 weeks or a year. Trials can last a long time. And what you're doing is you're extrapolating from that the 3 most important points that will help your argument to keep your person from being put to death, for instance, if you're defending someone who is accused of murder. So that's find those 3 elements, and that's the issue that you're going to have, as I mentioned the other day when our research librarian was with us. You're going to find way more arguments than you can use in a single speech. You cannot tell people 35 things; they shut down. So please recall that. All right, let's take a look at how you've got to watch the audience throughout the speech, and when you don't have that luxury because of the online situation, you've got to be very thoughtful. Consider what you're saying and how it's hitting someone, how it might be hitting someone who's for the issue, against the issue. So you want to make sure you choose your words very carefully. Choose your pauses very carefully. Choose the times that your voice goes up in pitch, or when you get a little louder, when you get a little softer, or maybe when you just pause to let something sink in. It's an acting exercise. I can't put it any other way. At the end of the day, a good public speech is acting. Okay, and if you're a lawyer, it's really acting, because you may know or think your client's guilty as hell, but your job is to give that person a good defense. So you're going to present the best persuasive argument to that jury, and that's what you're going to do. So in terms of your subjects, I would like you to send me a note and tell me what you'd like to speak about. I'll only tell you no if it's absolutely idiotic. Please don't defend, and let's not decide if cannabis should be legalized. I mean, that shit's over, okay? But take a look at that kind of stuff. Values. Talked about peer pressure living at home. People have values that sometimes the values that you got as a child, if you even if you move out of a house and you live in the same town, the same environment, meeting the same people, your values don't, they kind of stay the same. It doesn't mean that's bad or good. It just means it's true. So, but your values motivate your behavior. If your family has always been afraid of a certain group of people or a certain type of person, that kind of sticks with you. Whether you ever chose to buy into it or not, you're going to get out in the world, you're going to think that. We're dealing with a lot of this right now as a country, so it's very relevant. Always think about what's the right thing to do. And the question of ethics, at the end of the day, ethics comes down to what is the best for the most? What is the best decision for the largest number of people, for the majority, democracy, majority rules? What is the best way to deal with that? If you can affect somebody's attitude with this argument, if you present your points, let's talk about genetically modified food. That's an easy one to go with, okay? If I'm going to talk about genetically modified foods, first I'm going to describe what that is, okay? It is a way of growing food and changing the chemical makeup of a food so that it grows more easily, grows faster, eliminates diseases, maybe isn't vulnerable to various insects and things like that. The surface of your computer could maybe grow enough corn to feed a genetically modified corn could probably grow enough. So there's an incredible result in terms of bringing out more food. And just so you know, our greatest country in the world here, 1.5 million people every day, 1.5 million children, under 12, go to bed hungry every night. This country. What is that? What does that mean? Thousands and thousands of people right here in South Florida children didn't get enough nutritious food in a day. That's got to be something wrong. So there are reasons to argue about how do you deal with it. So genetically modified foods would vastly increase the availability of food. But the downside is we've only been dealing with this for about 20 years. And by the way, almost everything in a supermarket, unless marked non-GMO, is genetically modified. It's not required yet by the FDA to tell the world that your food is not genetically modified. They list all the ingredients, but they don't have to tell you that yet. Other countries do. So you should be able to make that decision. You go to a Whole Foods, you're always going to see if it is or isn't. So in that case, what you want to deal with is how do you balance the fact that genetically modified foods have been around for X number of years. We don't know everything we need to know about it. There have been a number of tests in which laboratory animals have been tested and over a period of time have grown tumors, had health problems arising directly connected with those genetically modified foods. We don't know how it affects people in the long run. So the question is, if you can feed all the people, should you not worry about what diseases it may cause years down the road, because hopefully we'll have all diseases cured by then? There's a balance to find. So whichever side of the argument you go on, you find it. What's the common ground? The common ground is, I think every one of us can agree that we would like not to see 500,000 children go to bed hungry in this country every night. Is GMO the answer to that, or is a little less greed the answer to that? Are we wasting food in the food chain? I had a friend in New York who worked with the New York Hotel Association years ago and got them to take all of the leftover foods, untouched foods from catering events, and bring them to food banks. Somehow they never thought of that before. They ran their hotels for years and years. Suddenly 25, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds of food got to food banks and got to people who needed it. Didn't cost anybody anything except the moving of the product and the desire, the ethics, the caring. So you can make changes in society. You just have to think about logical ways to do it. And unfortunately, things don't move as quickly as you'd like to make them happen. You can make a change, and if it's successful, it will grow in acceptance over time. Let's take a look what else we got here. Have a goal in a speech. If you don't know what you're arguing about and you are not enthusiastic about it, whether or not you personally care about it or not, you can't expect to get the audience. If you can't get your own crap out of the way, you can't deal with the crap in the audience. And the crap of the audience, as I said, is 3 totally different opinions floating around in the room, plus the fact that everybody's thinking 6 or 7 other things at the time. So by defining the subject first, you start to get people off some of those train tracks their minds are running on. By presenting 3 points that actually make some sense, that wake you up, I think maybe if you didn't know it, when I told you 500,000 children in this country go to bed hungry every night, that's an attention getter. That's going to get your attention. So you set a goal, talk about it. You don't have to convince everybody, but what you want to do is, in those 3 points you outline, point 1 is really the key thing. What's the biggest point about genetically modified foods? We can feed a whole lot more people. Okay? The second point is, how are we going to deal with the fallout from genetically modified foods? Is it better to give someone enough food so they can live to the age of 20, and even if they get ill, hopefully by then medicine will have gotten to the point where we can take care of that? We don't know. I mean, life is a lot of guessing, So what you're trying to do is, again, you're either going to try to get people to simply think about it differently. If you do nothing else but have that whole audience, regardless of what they think, simply go, well, that was interesting, worth considering. Then you've made the difference you need to make. Let's see what else we got here. Use facts. Let's talk about ethics again. Facts. You cannot base your ethics on fake news. And fake news is out there everywhere. People who get their news from Facebook are not getting news. They may be, they may not be, but they're certainly, it's not intended as a news source. It is an opinion of a person. And it's usually a lay person, meaning a person that is not a reporter, somebody who is not an expert on the subject, just decided, it's the most democratic thing on earth, and it's also the biggest open door for idiocy in the world. So, that's why if you read Facebook for a while, after a while, you just get exhausted. And if you're your age, you don't read Facebook at all, and you just get really even shorter, less thoughtful notes on Instagram or anything else like that. Quick. Everybody wants quick solutions. There aren't quick solutions. There are carefully thought out solutions based on facts, based on reason, based on ethics. And that's how you do a persuasive speech. Okay, that's really all I have for you today. I'm going to send you some stuff out so you'll have it on Monday. And we will talk on Wednesday, answer all your questions, and we'll get to it. Remember, this particular speech is about a third of the grade, so don't screw it up.